Imagine you wake up tomorrow and the sun is blue. Not yellow, not orange, blue, and dim like a dying candle in the vast darkness. This isn't science fiction. This actually happened. In 536 CE, the entire world plunged into what historians now call the worst year to be alive in human history. But forget what you think you know about the Dark Ages. This was darker than anything Hollywood has ever shown you. For 18 months, a mysterious haze blocked the sun across Europe, Asia, and the Middle East. No one knew why. No one knew when it would end. And absolutely no one was prepared for the nightmare that followed. So get comfortable, because tonight we're going back to the year 536 CE. And trust me, you're going to need those blankets. March 536 CE, Byzantine Empire. The rooster crows, but dawn never comes. You are 10 years old, lying on a straw mattress that crinkles and pokes with every movement. The rough fabric of your wool tunic scratches against your skin, and the single blanket your family owns barely keeps the chill at bay. Your one-room house, with its dirt floor and wooden walls chinked with mud and straw, smells of wood smoke, cooking grease, and the close quarters of 3 people living in a space no bigger than a modern bathroom. Through the wooden shutters, something is fundamentally wrong with the dawnlight. It's not the warm, golden glow that usually seeps through the cracks, gradually brightening until your father rises to begin the day's work. Instead, there's an eerie, bluish twilight that seems neither day nor night. Your father, Marcos, stands at the door. His weathered face, already lined at 35 from years of hard labour under the Mediterranean sun, shows confusion and something deeper, a fear he's trying to hide. His calloused hands, permanently stained with soil, fumble with the wooden latch. "Come look," he whispers, his voice barely audible over the crackling of the dying fire in the centre of the room. Your mother Anna stops stirring the barley porridge she was preparing for breakfast. She's only 28, but the harsh life of a Byzantine farmer's wife has already begun to show in the premature lines around her eyes and the way she moves with careful economy, conserving energy for the day's endless tasks. Outside, the entire village of Hagios Prokopios has emerged from their homes like sleepwalkers. 37 families, about 200 souls in total, all standing in the muddy common area between the houses, faces turned upward in stunned silence. The sky looks like dusk, but it's supposed to be morning. The sun, God help you all, the sun is blue and dim, casting no shadows at all. Children cling to their parents' rough tunics. Dogs whimper and press close to their owners. Even the livestock seems affected. Horses stomp nervously in their small paddocks, and cattle low uneasily. Is it an eclipse, you ask, your voice small and frightened in the eerie quiet that has settled over the village like a burial shroud. Eclipses don't last this long, your father replies, but his voice wavers with uncertainty. He's seen 3 eclipses in his lifetime, and this is nothing like them. And the sun wouldn't be blue. Old Elena, the village crone who's survived famines, wars, barbarian raids, and 3 husbands, hobbles forward with her gnarled walking stick. She's at least 60, ancient by the standards of your time, when most people are lucky to see 40. Her blind eye, clouded white from a childhood fever, seems to see more than her good one as she stares at the wrong-coloured sun. "It's the end times," she announces dramatically, her cracked voice carrying across the silent village. "Just like the prophets foretold, darkness upon the land, the 6th seal has been opened." "Shut up, Elena," your father snaps, though everyone can see the fear in his eyes. His response is braver than most feel, Elena's pronouncements carry weight in the village. She's the closest thing they have to a wise woman, and her predictions have an uncomfortable habit of coming true. You said the same thing about that two-headed calf 5 years ago, but Elena just cackles, showing the few brown teeth she has left. And have things gotten better since then? Emperor raising taxes every year, Goths and Vandals causing trouble everywhere, plague spreading from the east, and now this. She gestures toward the ghostly blue sun with one skeletal finger. Mark my words, this is just the beginning. Your family, like most others in this remote corner of the Byzantine Empire, are farmers. Your father grows barley and vegetables on 2 acres of rocky soil that his grandfather cleared from the forest. Your mother tends chickens and a milk goat, spins wool, and manages the household with the efficiency born of necessity. You, at 10 years old, help with the animals, collect eggs, gather firewood, and assist with the endless small tasks that keep a farming family alive. Everything in your world depends on the sun, on the weather, on the seasons, on forces beyond human control. The rhythm of your life follows the sun's path across the sky. Wake at dawn, work until dusk, sleep when darkness falls. But now that rhythm has been shattered. As you help with the morning chores, you notice the animals are behaving strangely. The chickens emerged from their coop briefly when the rooster crowed, then hurried back inside as if sensing danger. Your family's brown milk goat, Kira, paces nervously in her small pen, bleating anxiously. Even the insects have fallen silent. No buzzing of bees, no chirping of crickets, no droning of flies. The temperature is all wrong too. It should be warming up. March in this part of the empire usually brings the first hints of spring, with wildflowers beginning to bloom and trees starting to bud. Instead, the air carries a chill that makes your breath visible in small puffs of vapour. By what should be midday, the light hasn't improved. If anything, it seems dimmer. The blue sun hangs in the hazy sky like a ghost, providing barely enough illumination to see clearly. And here's the strangest part. You notice you're not casting a shadow. Neither is anyone else. You point this out to your father, and he stops his work to stare at the ground in amazement. Look, you say, pointing to where your shadow should be. No shadows anywhere. Your father stops digging in the vegetable garden and stares at the ground. It's true. The sun is so weak that it casts no shadows at all. In your entire life, you've never seen such a thing. Even on the cloudiest days, there's always been some hint of shadow, some directionality to the light. But now it's as if the light comes from everywhere and nowhere at once. Word comes from a traveller passing through, a merchant named Stephanos who trades between your village and Constantinople, the great city about 2 days' journey east. His face is grim as he shares news that makes everyone's blood run cold. It's the same in the capital, he reports, accepting a cup of watered wine from the village headman. Emperor Justinian himself has ordered lanterns lit throughout the palace, even during the day. The patriarch has called for special prayers. Some say it's a punishment from God for the emperor's wars against the Goths. Others whisper it's the work of Persian mages, casting spells against the Byzantine Empire. But Stephanos has more disturbing news. I met other traders on the road. They say it's like this everywhere, from Hispania in the west to Persia in the east. The whole world has gone dark. That night your family gathers close around the fire, burning more wood than you can afford. The unseasonable cold bites through your clothes despite the fact that it's March, and you pile on every blanket and cloak your family owns. Outside, you can hear other families doing the same. The sound of axes splitting wood echoes through the village as people burn their precious winter reserves. "What if the sun doesn't come back?" your mother asks, voicing the fear that everyone feels but no one wants to speak aloud. Your father doesn't answer right away. He stares into the fire, his face grave in the flickering light. Finally, he says quietly, "The sun will come back. It has to." But you can hear the doubt in his voice, and that frightens you more than anything else that's happened. The darkness spreads, 3 days pass, and the blue sun continues to hang in the sky like a dying ember. Each morning, people wake hoping to see normal daylight streaming through their windows, and each morning brings the same eerie twilight. The village has settled into an uneasy routine, but underneath the surface panic is building. The village men gather at the well each evening, their voices low and urgent. Your father joins these informal councils, and you often sneak close enough to listen, hiding behind Nicholas's cart. "My wheat hasn't grown at all," says Nicholas, the largest farmer in the village and the closest thing to a wealthy man among the peasants. His farm covers 5 acres, enough to feed his family and have surplus to trade. But now his voice carries worry that you've never heard before. Not a finger's width in 3 days. It's like time has stopped. Theodoros, who farms the rocky hillside plot, nods grimly. "Same with my barley, and have you noticed? No insects on their plants either. No bees, no beetles, nothing. It's like they've all disappeared." Your father suggests sending someone to the city for official news, but Nicholas scoffs. "You think the emperor tells peasants anything? Besides, Stephanos passed through yesterday coming from there. Says it's the same in Constantinople. People lighting oil lamps at midday. Priests leading prayer processions in the streets." Mias, the quiet shepherd who rarely speaks at these gatherings, clears his throat. "I heard a merchant from Antioch talking. Said it's like this everywhere, all the way to Persia and beyond. Ships coming into Constantinople report the same darkness across the whole Mediterranean. The implications sink in slowly, like cold water seeping through cracked pottery. If it's everywhere, there's nowhere to flee to, nowhere to escape whatever this is. Later that night, you lie awake on your straw mattress, listening to your parents whisper in voices they think you can't hear. "We need to count what food we have stored," your mother says, her voice tight with worry. "The sun will come back," your father insists, but there's desperation in his tone. "It has to. What if it doesn't?" "Not in time. The grain from last harvest won't last past summer even if we're careful. Then we'll find other food. Fish from the river, game in the forest. Everyone will be hunting and fishing, there won't be enough." You pull your thin blanket tighter around you, but it does nothing to ward off the chill in your heart. You've never heard your parents sound so worried before, so uncertain about the future. Their fear is more frightening than the strange blue sun itself. Desperation takes root. A week into the darkness, frost appears on the ground each morning, in March, when flowers should be blooming and trees budding. The unseasonable cold is more than just uncomfortable. It's deadly to the crops that everyone depends on for survival. Your father has begun setting snares in the forest, something he usually only does in the depths of winter when food is scarce. He shows you how to identify rabbit tracks in the frost, how to set a simple noose trap, how to check the snares without disturbing the surrounding area. "Pay attention," he says seriously as you both crouch beside a game trail. "You might need to know this." Your mother has started stretching the grain stores, mixing ground acorns into the bread to make it last longer. The acorns have to be leached in multiple changes of water to remove their bitterness, a process that takes days and uses precious fuel to keep fires burning under the leaching pots. The resulting bread tastes terrible, bitter and gritty, but no one complains. Food is becoming too precious to waste. The mood in the village has darkened along with the sky. Arguments break out over small things that would normally be settled with a shrug. Two farmers, Alexios and Demetrios, came to blows over whose turn it was at the communal grinding stone. The village headman, old Ioannes, had to separate them with threats of fines neither could afford. The social fabric that holds the village together is starting to fray. People eye their neighbours with suspicion, wondering if they're hoarding food or planning to steal. Children are kept closer to home. Hospitality, once freely given to travellers, becomes grudging and scarce. Then comes news that makes everything worse. Soldiers are approaching. You're gathering dead wood for the fire when you hear the sound. A rhythmic jingling and clanking that can only mean one thing. Armed men are coming down the road from the east. Your father drops his hoe and hurries toward the sound, along with most of the other village men. You follow at a distance, curious and frightened. The soldiers are Byzantine troops, servants of Emperor Justinian, heading west toward Italy where they're supposed to be fighting the Goths and Vandals. There are about 20 of them, travel-worn and grim-faced. Their armour, which should gleam in the sunlight, looks dull and tarnished in the strange blue twilight. Their leader is a scarred veteran with hard eyes and a pragmatic manner. Your father and the other village men approach cautiously. Relations between peasants and soldiers are always tense. The army has a habit of taking what it needs from the countryside, regardless of what the locals can spare. "What news from the capital?" your father asks the leader, a gruff man with a scar running down his left cheek. The soldier looks up at the dim blue sun, then back at the gathered villagers. "Same as here," he replies bluntly. "Emperor's got the scholars trying to figure it out. Some say it's ash from a great fire mountain in the north. Others say it's the breath of dragons." He shrugs, clearly skeptical of both explanations. "All I know is we're still expected to fight the Goths in Italy. Darkness or no darkness?" "And the crops?" someone asks. "In Constantinople?" The soldier's expression grows grimmer. "Nothing's growing. Food prices are already 10 times normal. Emperor's ordered grain ships from Egypt and Africa." He pauses, looking at the worried faces around him. But ships can only carry so much, and there are a lot of mouths to feed. The implication hangs in the air like smoke. Even the emperor, with all the resources of the empire at his disposal, is struggling to feed his people. After the soldiers leave, taking some of the village's precious food with them as imperial tax, the headman calls everyone together in the village square. The entire population gathers, farmers and their families, the blacksmith, the carpenter, the miller, even the old priest who serves the small stone church. "We need to be smart," Ioannes tells the gathered villagers, his voice carrying the authority of his 60 years. "If the crops don't grow, we'll need to rely on what we have stored. From now on, we ration everything, and we send parties to the forest daily for anything edible. Mushrooms, berries, game, anything we can find." "What about the city?" calls out Petros, whose family has relatives in Constantinople. "Should we go there?" The headman shakes his head decisively. "Cities will be the first to starve. Better to be here where we at least have land and forest." As people disperse to their homes, you notice how carefully they avoid eye contact with neighbours. Everyone is already thinking about their own family's supplies, mentally calculating how long they can last. The community that has sustained this village for generations is beginning to crack under the pressure of survival. That night, you're awakened by commotion outside. Your father grabs his pitchfork, the closest thing to a weapon a farmer owns, and peers through a crack in the door. Outside, torchlight flickers in the darkness as angry voices fill the night air. Someone has broken into the village storehouse where the seed grain is kept, the precious reserve that will be planted when spring truly arrives. The headman and several other men have caught the thief in the act. It's Dmitri, whose family arrived in the village only last year, refugees from barbarian raids further north. "My children are hungry," Dmitri shouts as strong hands hold him fast. His wife and 3 young children huddle nearby, crying. "What was I supposed to do? Watch them starve?" "We're all going to be hungry," the headman says grimly, his face hard in the torchlight. "But if we eat the seed grain now, we'll have nothing to plant when the sun returns." "If it returns," Dmitri spits, desperation making him bold. "My family can't wait for if." The punishment for stealing seed grain is severe in normal times, exile or worse. These aren't normal times, but the crime is still serious. The seed grain represents the village's future. Without it, there will be no harvest even if the sun does return. 3 days in the stocks, the headman pronounces after a hurried consultation with the village elders, and your family's rations cut for a week. It seems both harsh and lenient at the same time. Harsh because 3 days exposed to the elements in this unseasonable cold could mean death. Lenient because in normal times, the punishment would be much worse. But these aren't normal times, and everyone understands that desperation drives people to desperate acts. As Dmitri is led away to the wooden stocks in the centre of the village, his wife's wails echo off the walls of the surrounding houses. His children cry for their father, not understanding why he's being punished for trying to feed them. You return to your bed, but sleep is a long time coming. Outside you can hear the sound of people reinforcing their doors, adding extra bars and locks. Trust, once given freely among neighbours, has become a luxury no one can afford. They slide into chaos. As the days turn into weeks, the strange twilight becomes a grotesque new normal. Your eyes have adapted to seeing in the dim blue light, though everything has a flat, lifeless quality that makes the world seem like a faded painting. But while you can see, the cold is getting worse with each passing day. It's now April, a time when flowers should be blooming and the air should be warm enough to work without heavy clothes. Instead, there's frost every morning that kills what few green shoots have attempted to emerge from the soil. The crops in the fields are not just failing to grow, they're actively dying, withering back into the earth as if retreating from this wrong world. Your family's food stores are running dangerously low and you've all lost weight. Your clothes hang loose on your frame, and you've learned to ignore the constant gnawing in your belly. Your mother has been skipping meals, claiming she's not hungry, but you know she's giving her share to you. The sacrifice shows in her face. Her cheeks are hollow, and her eyes have taken on the haunted look of chronic hunger. The forest provides some food, mushrooms that your mother carefully identifies before cooking, early berries that are smaller and more bitter than usual, and occasionally a rabbit from your father's increasingly elaborate network of snares. But it's not enough. It's never enough. News trickles in from travellers who still brave the roads, though their numbers are dwindling. The reports are uniformly grim. From Hispania in the west to Persia in the east, the sun remains dimmed. Crops are failing everywhere. The Byzantine Empire, already stretched thin by Emperor Justinian's ambitious wars to reconquer the western territories, is struggling to feed its own people. The imperial administration, once so confident in its ability to manage the empire's resources, seems as helpless as anyone else. Tax collectors still arrive in villages, but they find little to collect. Soldiers still march along the roads, but they look increasingly desperate, taking food from people who have barely enough for themselves. One morning, About 6 weeks after the darkness began, you wake to find your father already gone. Your mother, stirring a thin porridge made mostly of acorn flour and hope, explains that he's joined a group of men from the village on a hunting expedition deeper into the forest than they usually venture. They'll be gone for several days, she says, her voice carefully neutral. We need meat, and the animals near the village are all gone. While he's away, you take on more responsibilities. Each morning you check the small vegetable garden, willing the plants to grow in the cold twilight. You collect what few eggs the confused chickens still lay. They've stopped following their normal pattern, and many have stopped laying altogether. You help your mother search the forest edge for anything edible, wild onions, mushrooms, bark that can be ground into a coarse flour. On the 3rd day after your father left, you're collecting firewood near the edge of the forest, when you hear a sound that makes you freeze. Looking up through the thin, leafless trees, you see a deer, a young doe, watching you cautiously from between the trunks. In normal times, this would be extraordinary luck. Deer usually stay deep in the forest, away from human settlements. But these aren't normal times, and as you look at the animal, you can see that it's suffering too. The deer looks thin, its ribs visible even from where you stand. The cold and lack of plant growth is affecting all creatures, not just humans. You freeze, barely daring to breathe. You have no weapon, no way to capture this potential feast for your family. The deer stares at you for a long moment, as if trying to decide whether you represent danger or just another hungry creature in a world gone wrong. Then silently it turns and disappears back into the forest. When you tell your mother about the encounter later, she sighs deeply. The animals are struggling too. Everything is dying. That night, lying on your increasingly uncomfortable straw mattress, you can feel every individual piece of straw now that you've lost so much weight. You stare up at the thatched roof of your home and wonder what will happen next. Will the sun ever return to normal? Will the crops grow again? Or is this the new world, cold, dim, and hungry? Your father returns the next day with the hunting party, and the sight of them tells the story before they speak a word. They look exhausted and disheartened, their faces gaunt with hunger and defeat. Between the 5 of them, they've managed to catch only 1 small boar and a few squirrels, hardly worth the 4 days they spent hunting in the deep forest. The forest is empty, your father tells your mother that night when they think you can't hear. His voice carries a desperation you've never heard before. The animals are either hiding deeper than we can go, or they're dead. And we weren't the only ones hunting. We saw people from other villages, even some who looked like they'd come from the city. What are we going to do? Your mother asks, fear evident in her voice. Your father is silent for a long moment, staring into the dying fire. When he finally speaks, his words change everything. We might have to go to Constantinople. At least the emperor will have food. He won't let the capital starve, even if the rest of the empire does. The idea of leaving your home is terrifying. You've never been further than the market town of Melantias, a half-day's walk away. Constantinople is 2 days' journey, a place you've only heard about in stories. A great city with walls higher than the tallest trees, with the magnificent Hagia Sophia Church that's said to be the most beautiful building in the world, with more people than you can imagine living in one place. But the prospect of food, real food, not just thin soup and bitter acorn bread, is tempting enough to outweigh the fear. The next day, the headman calls another village meeting. The news he brings is worse than anyone expected. Imperial tax collectors are expected to arrive within the week, and they'll demand their usual share of the village's production, darkness or no darkness. We barely have enough for ourselves, protests Alexios, whose family includes 4 young children. How can we give anything to the emperor? We have no choice, the headman says wearily. If we refuse, they'll take it by force and punish us besides. That's how the empire works. Then what do we do? Your father asks, voicing what everyone is thinking. Wait here to starve? The headman has no answer. No one does. The systems that have sustained this village, this region, this empire for centuries are breaking down under the weight of an unprecedented catastrophe. 2 days later, as the unnatural twilight continues into its 6th week, your family makes the decision that will change everything. Like many others in the village, you'll abandon your home and journey to Constantinople. The city will be dangerous, especially now. But staying means certain starvation when winter comes. The preparation takes a full day. You pack what little you can carry, some clothing, your mother's prized bronze cooking pot that came from her grandmother, a small sack of precious grain that represents perhaps a week's worth of food, a sharp knife that your father inherited from his father. Every item has to be weighed against its utility. There's no room for sentiment when survival is at stake. Your father trades your family's goat, Kyra, to Nicholas for a small 2-wheeled cart that you'll pull yourselves since you have no horse or ox. The transaction breaks your heart. Kyra has been part of your family since before you were born, and her milk has kept you alive through many hard times. But now she represents transportation, and transportation might mean the difference between life and death. The morning of your departure, you take one last look at the home you've known all your life. The single room with its dirt floor and wooden walls, the small garden where you've spent countless hours helping your mother tend vegetables, the chicken coop where you've collected eggs every morning for as long as you can remember. The darkness hasn't improved. If anything, the haze seems thicker, the blue sun fainter. The fields that should be green with growing crops are brown and withered, like a landscape from a nightmare. As your family sets off down the rutted dirt road toward Constantinople, joining a stream of other desperate people, all heading for the same uncertain hope, you realize that your childhood is ending. You've never known real hunger before, or real fear, or the terrible uncertainty that comes with not knowing if you'll be alive tomorrow. But looking at the faces around you, gaunt, determined, frightened, you understand that this is just the beginning. The darkness that fell in March of 536 CE would last for 18 months, and what came after would be even worse. The road to Constantinople. The road to Constantinople is like nothing you've ever seen. Normally, the main highway between your region and the capital carries merchants, imperial messengers, pilgrims heading to the great churches, and the occasional military unit. Now it's clogged with humanity, not just from your village, but from every farm and settlement for miles around. Families push handcarts loaded with their possessions. Old people lean on walking sticks, their faces etched with exhaustion. Children cry from hunger and cold. Dogs follow hopefully, but even they look gaunt and desperate. Everyone has the same hollow-cheeked look, the same desperate hope that the great city might offer salvation from the endless twilight that has swallowed the world. Your family's small cart creaks ominously as you help your father pull it over the rutted road. The wooden wheels, never designed for such a journey, are already showing stress. Inside the cart are your few possessions and your mother, who twisted her ankle badly on the first day of travel. She insists she can walk, but the pain shows clearly in her face every time she puts weight on it. The going is slow. What should be a 2-day journey stretches into 3, then 4. The road is so crowded that sometimes you move no faster than a walking pace, trapped behind other refugee families with their carts and bundles. Look at them all, your father mutters, nodding toward the stream of humanity trudging toward the city. His voice carries a mixture of awe and despair. Half the empire must be heading for Constantinople. A man walking nearby, overhearing, shakes his head grimly. Emperor's going to have his hands full if he even lets us in. I heard they're turning people away at the gates. Your father frowns. They can't turn everyone away. We're citizens of the empire. The man just shrugs. City's got to feed who it's got already. Can't feed the whole countryside. The thought sends a chill through you that has nothing to do with the unseasonable cold. What if you make this desperate journey only to be turned away? What if Constantinople's walls, built to keep enemies out, now keep hungry citizens out as well? As night falls, though it's increasingly hard to tell the difference between day and night in this perpetual twilight, your family joins others making camp by the roadside. Small fires flicker in the gloom, casting more light than the hidden sun provided all day. The mood is subdued. No one has much food to share, and those who do guard it jealously. Your mother winces as she examines her swollen ankle by firelight. The joint is clearly painful, possibly sprained, and the constant walking isn't helping it heal. It's not getting better, your father says quietly, though he tries to keep the worry out of his voice. I can walk tomorrow, she insists, though you can see the pain in her eyes every time she moves. That's when an old woman from another village hobbles over to your fire. She's ancient, at least 70, which is nearly unheard of, with white hair and a face like weathered leather. But her eyes are sharp and kind. Got yourself a bad twist there, she says, gesturing to your mother's ankle. Without waiting for an invitation, she sits down next to the fire. Her movements are careful but confident, those of someone who's survived a long time by being practical. I'm fine, your mother says stiffly, the automatic response of someone who's never been able to afford weakness. Of course you are, the old woman says with a snort, and I'm the Empress Theodora. She reaches into a leather pouch at her waist and pulls out some dried leaves. Willow bark, chew it, tastes like horse piss, but it'll help with the pain. Your mother hesitates, then takes the offering with a nod of thanks. In times like these, any help is precious. Been on the road 3 days, the old woman continues, settling herself more comfortably by the fire. Left when my son's family did. They've gone on ahead. Younger legs move faster. She looks around at the makeshift camp, the dozens of small fires dotting the darkness like fallen stars. Never seen anything like this. Not in 70 years of living. The darkness, you mean? Your father asks. All of it, she replies, gesturing broadly. The cold, the dying crops, the roads full of refugees. I've lived through 2 famines in my time, and this feels worse. At least then we knew what was happening. Drought, or locusts, or war. This. She gestures toward the dim sky where the blue sun hangs like a ghost. This ain't natural. The old woman introduces herself as Agatha. Her son, she explains, works the docks in Constantinople. If we can find him, he might help, she says. Demetrios is his name. Everyone at the harbour knows him. In the morning, your family and Agatha continue together toward the capital. Your mother insists on walking despite her ankle, though she leans heavily on a stick that your father cut for her. Agatha, despite her age, seems to have energy that younger people lack. The kind of endurance that comes from a lifetime of hardship. By what should be midday, the great walls of Constantinople come into view. Even in the dim light, they're an awesome sight. Massive stone barriers stretching across the horizon, taller than anything you've ever imagined. Above them rise domes and spires. the tops of palaces and churches reaching toward the wrong-coloured sky. But something is clearly wrong. The road leading to the main gate, the Golden Gate, Agatha calls it, is completely jammed with people. Hundreds of them, maybe thousands, all pressed against the entrance like water against a dam, and the gate itself is closed, with armoured soldiers standing guard before it, their spears and shields forming an impenetrable barrier. That doesn't look good, your father says, stating what everyone can see. As your group gets closer, you can hear the shouting. The crowd is angry, demanding to be let in. People wave imperial documents, claim citizenship rights, beg for mercy. But the soldiers hold firm, their formation unbreakable. "Citizens of the Empire only," one soldier bellows through his metal helmet. His voice carries the authority of imperial command. "By order of Emperor Justinian, show proof you're registered for the Annona, or turn back." The Annona is the system of grain distribution that feeds the citizens of the capital, a complex bureaucracy that requires official registration and documentation. Your family, as rural farmers, has never been part of this system. You're citizens of the Empire in theory, but in practice you're nobody. "What do we do now?" your mother asks, her face pale with pain and fear. Your father surveys the scene, the closed gates, the desperate crowd, the immovable soldiers. "We need another way in," he says finally. "A smaller gate, maybe, or someone who can vouch for us." That's when Agatha speaks up. "The harbour of Theodosius. My son works the docks there. If we can find him, he might help. It's a slim chance, but better than nothing." Your father nods, and your small group breaks away from the main road, circling west around the massive city walls toward the harbour. The detour adds hours to your journey, and your mother's ankle gets worse with every step. By the time you reach the harbour, the dim daylight is fading toward true night. But the harbour is busy despite the late hour, with ships being frantically unloaded by torchlight. Even in the gloom, you can see that these are grain ships, massive vessels whose cargo is more precious than gold in these dark times. Workers swarm over the ships like ants, hauling sacks of wheat and barley while soldiers oversee the operation to ensure none of the precious grain disappears. The dockside is chaotic, people shouting orders, animals braying under heavy loads, the constant creak of ropes and wood as cargo is transferred from ship to shore. "How will we find your son in all this?" your father asks Agatha, raising his voice over the noise. "He's a foreman," she replies confidently. "Name of Demetrios, everyone knows him." Your father begins asking dock workers about Demetrios. Most ignore him. They're too busy to help strangers, and in times like these everyone guards their time and energy carefully. But finally, one worker, pausing to wipe sweat from his brow, points toward a large warehouse. "Might be in there tallying the new shipment," he says. Your father thanks him with a small piece of bread, a valuable gift when food is so scarce. Your group heads toward the warehouse, hope and exhaustion warring in everyone's faces. Inside, it's surprisingly warm from the body heat of dozens of workers hauling sacks of grain. Oil lamps hang from wooden posts, creating pools of yellow light in the gloom, the first normal light you've seen in weeks. "Demetrios!" your father calls. "We're looking for Demetrios!" A burly man with a short black beard looks up from a table where he's making marks on a wax tablet. He has the confident bearing of someone used to authority, but his face shows the same strain that everyone carries these days. "Who's asking?" he calls back. "We brought your mother," your father says, gesturing to Agatha. The man's face changes instantly. "Mother?" He hurries over, setting down his tablet and embracing the old woman. "What are you doing here? I told you to stay in the village." Village is dying, Agatha says simply. Everyone's leaving. Demetrius looks past her at your family, taking in your hollow cheeks, your travel-stained clothes, your mother's obvious pain. His expression is weary but not unkind. And these people helped me on the road, good folks. Demetrios sighs, running a hand through his hair. Mother, the city is overflowing already. There's barely enough food, even with the Emperor's Egyptian grain shipments. They've closed the gates to anyone without citizenship papers. Please, your mother says, stepping forward despite her injured ankle. We have nowhere else to go. Our crops have failed. Everything's dying in this darkness. Demetrius looks at her, then at you, a 10-year-old child with hungry eyes and ribs showing through your tunic. His resolve visibly weakens. I can get you inside the walls, he says finally. Finding you a place to stay and food to eat, that'll be harder. We'll work, your father says quickly. Whatever jobs need doing, I'm strong and I know farming. Demetrios laughs, but there's no humour in it. Farming? In the city? With the sun gone? He shakes his head. But there's always work on the docks. Hard work, mind you, for little pay. Anything, your father says. We just need a chance. That night, your family sleeps in a corner of the warehouse on sacks of grain, the most comfortable bed you've had in weeks, despite the hard lumps of grain beneath the burlap. The warehouse is warm from the body heat of workers and the stored grain, a blessed relief from the constant cold outside. Demetrios brings you a small portion of fish stew, more flavour than you've tasted since the darkness began. The fish is salted and a bit tough, but after weeks of acorn bread and thin gruel, it tastes like a feast. Don't tell anyone I gave you this, he warns, looking around nervously. Food riots started last week. People are desperate, and if word gets out that I'm feeding strangers, he doesn't need to finish the thought. Hunger makes people dangerous, and Constantinople is full of hungry people. Life in the dying city. In the morning, Demetrios leads your family through a small service gate in the massive walls. He's vouched for you as workers for the harbour, which gets you past the guards, though they look at your family with suspicion. You're clearly refugees, and refugees mean more mouths to feed in a city already straining its resources. And then you're inside Constantinople, the greatest city in the world. Even cloaked in the perpetual twilight, the city takes your breath away. Buildings rise 3 and 4 stories high, taller than the tallest trees in your village. Streets are paved with actual stone instead of dirt. People of every description hurry past, not just farmers and labourers like in your village, but men in rich silk robes, women with painted faces and elaborate hairstyles, soldiers in gleaming armour, priests in flowing religious vestments. The noise is overwhelming after the quiet of your village. Voices in a dozen languages mingle with the sounds of commerce, merchants hawking their wares, animals bleating and lowing, wheels creaking over stone, hammers ringing on metal. The smells are equally intense. Spices from distant lands, fresh bread, roasting meat, but also less pleasant odours from too many people living too close together. But beneath the spectacle, you can see signs of the same crisis that drove your family here. The faces of the city dwellers are drawn with hunger and worry. Markets that should be bustling with activity have half-empty stalls. Soldiers patrol everywhere, their hands resting on their weapons. Outside a large building that Demetrios identifies as one of the imperial granaries, hundreds of people stand in a long, patient line. The Emperor ordered the city granaries opened, Demetrios explains, following your gaze. Each registered citizen gets a daily ration. Not enough to live on, but something. And people like us, your father asks, Demetrius's silence is answer enough. Without citizenship papers, without registration in the city's bureaucracy, your family might as well be invisible. Demetrios leads you through the maze of streets to the harbour district, where narrow alleys wind between crowded tenements and warehouses. The smell of fish and salt water hangs in the air, mingling with less pleasant odours from the closely packed buildings. He stops at a dilapidated structure wedged between two warehouses. "My friend Sophia runs this boarding house," he says. "She might have space in the cellar." The cellar turns out to be little more than a stone room with a dirt floor, already occupied by two other refugee families. The space is cramped, dark, and damp, but it's dry and safer than sleeping in the streets. Your mother nearly weeps with relief when she can finally rest her injured ankle. "How much?" your father asks, already reaching for the small leather pouch where he keeps your family's few remaining coins. "First week is covered," Demetrios says, "as a favour to my mother. After that," he shrugs, "we'll see if I can find you work." Over the next few days, your family settles into a new and precarious routine. Your father works on the docks from dawn until dusk, loading and unloading ships for a few copper coins and sometimes a portion of fish or damaged grain that would otherwise be thrown away. The work is back-breaking, hauling heavy sacks in the dim light, always under the watchful eyes of supervisors and soldiers. Your mother, once her ankle heals enough for her to walk without wincing, finds work washing clothes for a wealthy family near the Forum of Constantine. The pay is minimal, but it comes with occasional scraps of food and cast-off clothing that can be mended and worn. You're left to your own devices much of the time, a freedom that's both exciting and terrifying. The city is a dangerous place for a child alone, especially one who's obviously a refugee. But it's also full of wonders you never imagined. Massive churches with soaring domes, public baths where people actually clean themselves regularly, markets selling goods from across the known world. You quickly learn the survival skills of a street child, which market stalls might give a hungry youngster a crust of bread out of pity, which streets to avoid because gangs control them, which adults might hire you for small tasks in exchange for food or a copper coin. You learn to make yourself useful enough that people don't chase you away, but not so visible that you attract the wrong kind of attention. The city buzzes with theories about the darkness. Street preachers blame sin and heresy, calling for repentance and donations to the church. Scholars in the university debate whether it's ash from a distant volcano or some sort of celestial phenomenon. Foreign merchants whisper about similar darkness in other lands, spreading rumours and fear in equal measure. One day, about 2 weeks after arriving in the city, you're helping an old baker named Cosmas stack his empty baskets when you notice a commotion near the great Forum of Constantine. A crowd has gathered, listening to a man in elaborate ecclesiastical robes speaking from the steps of a church. Curious, you edge closer through the press of bodies. The speaker is young for a priest, perhaps 30, with the intense eyes of a true believer. "This is a test from God," he's saying, his voice carrying over the crowd. "The darkness has come because we have strayed from the true path. Emperor Justinian builds his grand churches while allowing heresy to flourish in their provinces. Some in the crowd murmur agreement. Others look uncomfortable, glancing around nervously. Criticizing the emperor, even indirectly, can be dangerous. The sun hides its face because of our sins," the priest continues. "Repent. Give what you have to the church and pray for salvation before it's too late." That's Cosmos," says a voice beside you. You turn to see a boy about your age, skinny with dirt-smudged cheeks and the sharp eyes of someone who's learned to survive on the streets. He's been preaching that stuff for weeks. The boy introduces himself as Marcus, He's been living in Constantinople all his life, the son of a stoneworker who died in an accident 2 years ago. His mother washes clothes to support them, but barely makes enough to survive even in normal times. "You're new," Marcus observes. It's not a question. He can tell by the way you dress, the way you stand, the way you look at the city with wide eyes. You nod and find yourself telling him your story. The darkness falling on your village, the failed crops, the desperate journey to the capital. Marcus listens with the serious attention of someone who understands that everyone has a story these days, and most of them are tragic. "Want to see something?" he asks when you finish. He leads you through a maze of alleys to a spot where you can look out over the harbour. The view is magnificent. Dozens of ships at anchor, their masts creating a forest of wood and rope against the dim sky. But Marcus points to something else. A line of ships on the horizon, barely visible in the perpetual twilight. "More grain ships," he explains. "They've been coming every few days, bringing wheat from Egypt and Africa, but it's not enough." He gestures toward the city around you. Too many people, not enough food. As if to emphasize his point, you hear shouting from the direction of one of the grain distribution centers. Looking toward the sound, you can see a crowd pressed against the doors of a warehouse, their voices raised in anger or desperation. "Food riot," Marcus says matter-of-factly. "Third one this week. When people get hungry enough." He doesn't need to finish. You've seen what desperation can do. The theft of seed grain in your village. The way neighbours stop trusting each other. The hard choices people make when survival is at stake. That evening you return to the cellar that serves as your family's temporary home. Your parents are already there, exhausted from their day's work. Your father's hands are raw from handling rough rope and heavy sacks. Your mother's back aches from bending over wash basins all day. "Any luck finding better work?" your mother asks hopefully. Your father shakes his head. Demetrius says there might be something in one of the imperial workshops, but they're laying people off, not hiring. Too little work with trade disrupted. The economic implications of the crisis are becoming clear. Ships aren't sailing because navigation is difficult in the dim light. Trade routes are disrupted because regions that normally export food are keeping what little they have. The complex web of commerce that sustains the empire is breaking down, link by link. "We'll manage," your mother says, but there's strain in her voice. "We have to." Outside, Constantinople sleeps uneasily under its dome of unnatural twilight. In the harbour, grain ships rock at anchor, their precious cargo carefully guarded. In the imperial palace, advisors probably debate theories and solutions while Emperor Justinian tries to hold his empire together with increasingly inadequate resources. And in cellars and tenements throughout the city, refugee families like yours wonder how long they can survive in a world that has forgotten how to be normal. The fire. 3 months into your stay in Constantinople, when your family has just begun to hope that maybe, somehow, you can survive this crisis, disaster strikes again with the sudden fury of divine wrath. You're sleeping in the cramped cellar when the first shouts pierce the night. Fire! Fire in the harbour district. The smell reaches you before you're fully awake. Smoke, thick and acrid, carrying the scent of burning wood, rope, and worse things. Your father is on his feet instantly, his years of farming having given him the reflexes to respond quickly to any threat to survival. Outside, the narrow streets are chaos. People pour from buildings carrying whatever possessions they can grab. Children cry, separated from parents in the confusion. Dogs bark frantically. The orange glow visible over the rooftops tells a terrifying story. This isn't a small house fire that can be contained with buckets and wet blankets. This is something much worse. The fire spreads with impossible speed through the tightly packed wooden buildings of the harbour district. In normal times, the city's fire brigades might have contained it quickly. But these aren't normal times. The brigades are understaffed, their equipment poorly maintained, their water supplies limited by the crisis that grips the empire. Marcus appears beside you, his face streaked with soot and fear. "The granary," he shouts over the noise. The fire started near the main granary. The implications hit you like a physical blow. If the grain stores burn, thousands of people will starve. The carefully rationed supplies that keep the city alive will go up in smoke. Your family joins the stream of people fleeing the advancing flames. Your mother, still favouring her injured ankle, moves as quickly as she can through streets lit by the hellish orange glow. Your father carries what few possessions you have, his face grim with the knowledge that you're losing everything again. The heat grows more intense as you move through the maze of narrow alleys. Sparks rain down from burning buildings, starting new fires faster than people can stamp them out. The air is thick with smoke that burns your lungs and brings tears to your eyes. Marcus grabs your hand. "This way, I know another way out." He leads you through alleys you've never seen before, navigating by instinct and local knowledge. But as you flee through the smoke-filled streets, a burning beam crashes down from a collapsing building, blocking the narrow passage and separating you from your friend. "Marcus!" you shout, but the roar of the flames drowns out your voice. You turn to call for your parents, but they're nowhere to be seen. In the chaos of the evacuation, with smoke limiting visibility and panic driving people in all directions, your family has been scattered like leaves in a storm. You're alone in a burning city, a 10-year-old child surrounded by flames and terror. For hours you stumble through the nightmare landscape, calling for your parents, searching faces in the smoke-filled darkness. The fire seems to be everywhere, jumping from building to building faster than people can flee. You see things that will haunt your dreams for years. People trapped by flames, crying for help that doesn't come. Families torn apart by the chaos. The desperate faces of those who've lost everything they ever owned. By dawn, though dawn is barely distinguishable from night in this twilight world, the fire has consumed a third of Constantinople's harbour district. Entire neighbourhoods that stood for centuries are reduced to smoking rubble. The main granary, despite desperate efforts to save it, has burned completely, sending thousands of tons of precious grain up in smoke. You find yourself in a refugee camp that's been hastily set up in one of the city's forums. Hundreds of people sit or lie on the stone pavement, their possessions reduced to whatever they managed to carry. Many are injured, burns, cuts from falling debris, injuries from being trampled in the panic. Priests and what few city officials remain move through the crowd, trying to provide what aid they can. But resources are limited, and there are so many people in need. You search desperately through the camp, hoping against hope to see familiar faces. Days pass, then weeks. You sleep on the hard stone, eat whatever scraps of food are distributed, and continue searching. Finally, a priest named Father Methodios takes pity on you. He's a kind man, perhaps 50 years old, with gentle eyes and the patience that comes from years of dealing with human suffering. "Child," he says gently, kneeling beside you as you sit staring at the entrance to the camp, still hoping to see your parents appear. Many people died in the fire, the smoke, the flames, the buildings that collapsed. Some were never found. The words hit you like a physical blow. For the first time since the darkness began, you truly understand what it means to be completely alone in the world. You're not just separated from your parents, you're orphaned in a dying city, with no family, no home, no way to survive except by your own wits and the uncertain kindness of strangers. That night, for the first time in months, you cry yourself to sleep. Not the quiet tears of hunger or fear, but the deep, wrenching sobs of a child who has lost everything that ever mattered. The sea voyage, weeks pass in the refugee camp. You learn to survive on charity and your own resourcefulness, but it's a precarious existence. Food is scarce, shelter is minimal, and winter is coming. Though in this world of perpetual twilight, winter might mean death for anyone without proper resources. That's when Captain Alexios finds you. He's a sea captain, perhaps 40 years old, with the weathered face and confident bearing of someone who's spent his life dealing with storms and uncertainties. His ship, the Theotokos, is one of the few still making regular voyages in these difficult times. He's walking through the refugee camp looking for able-bodied workers who might crew his ship for the dangerous voyage to Sicily. Most refugees are too weak, too old, or too encumbered with families to be useful sailors. But something about your story moves him. A farming family from the countryside, he muses when you tell him about your parents and your village. And you're alone now? You nod, not trusting yourself to speak without crying. I'm sailing to Sicily, he says after a moment of thought. My brother Theo has a farm there. The darkness isn't as bad in the south. They say the sun still shines, though dimly. He could use help with his land, and I could use another pair of hands on the ship. It's the first real hope you've felt since the fire. Sicily represents escape from this dying city, a chance to start over somewhere that might still be alive. The voyage across the Mediterranean is rough, the ship tossed by strange storms that seem to follow the unnatural weather patterns. You've never been on a ship before, and for the first few days you're violently seasick, retching over the side until there's nothing left in your stomach but bile. But gradually something miraculous begins to happen. As the ship sails south, away from the worst of the atmospheric disturbance, the sky begins to brighten. Not much. The sun is still pale and wrong-coloured, but enough that you can see actual shadows again for the first time in months. Look, Captain Alexios says, pointing toward the horizon where the sun hangs like a dim lamp through the haze. It's getting better. The improvement is slight but unmistakable. The sun, while still pale yellow rather than its normal brilliant gold, shows hints of its former strength. The temperature is warmer too, not warm enough for summer, but no longer the bone-deep chill that gripped Constantinople. Other passengers on the ship, mostly refugees like yourself, families who've saved enough to buy passage to somewhere that might offer hope, point excitedly at their shadows on the deck. Children laugh for the first time in months. Adults dare to hope that maybe somehow the world might return to normal. The ship calls at several ports along the way, small coastal towns that are struggling but not dying. In these places you see something you haven't seen since the darkness began. Crops that are actually growing, not thriving, but growing. The local people look hungry and worried, but not desperate. There's still some measure of normal life. It gives you hope that somewhere, somehow, the world is healing. The farm in Sicily, Theo, Captain Alexios's brother, meets you at the port of Syracuse. He's a weathered farmer in his 40s, with kind but tired eyes, and the practical manner of someone who's spent his life working the land. His own crops have struggled under the strange weather, but they haven't failed entirely like those in the north. "You can stay," he says simply after hearing your story. "I need the help, and you need a home." Sicily becomes your refuge from the chaos of the wider world. Theo's farm sits on a hillside overlooking the sea, with olive groves, a vegetable garden, and a small flock of sheep. The work is hard, tending animals, working the fields, learning the hundreds of skills needed to keep a farm running. But for the first time since leaving your village, you feel something like safety. Theo treats you with quiet kindness, never prying about your past, but always ensuring you have enough to eat and a warm place to sleep. He has no children of his own. His wife died in childbirth several years ago, and perhaps he sees in you the son he never had. His wife's sister, Maria, comes to help manage the household. She's a widow in her 30s, practical and efficient, but with a maternal warmth that you've desperately missed. She teaches you to read using one of the few books Theo owns, a collection of saints' lives, and helps you write letters to Constantinople, hoping against hope for word of your parents. Slowly, very slowly, the darkness begins to lift. Not all at once, but day by day, week by week, like a fever gradually breaking. The sun grows stronger, though it never quite returns to its former brilliance. Shadows become more defined. Plants begin to grow more normally, though harvests remain smaller than they should be. The change is gradual enough that you don't notice it day by day, but looking back after weeks have passed, the improvement is undeniable. The perpetual twilight that has gripped the world for months is finally beginning to weaken. News comes from other parts of the Mediterranean, reports carried by ships and travelling merchants. The situation varies from place to place. Northern regions remain darker and colder. Some areas have seen complete crop failure and widespread famine, but other regions, particularly in the south, are slowly beginning to recover. Theo explains it simply. Whatever caused this, it's starting to pass, like a storm that's finally moving on. But even as the immediate crisis begins to ease, its effects continue to ripple outward. Trade routes remain disrupted. Entire populations have been displaced. Political systems strained by the crisis are slow to recover. The world that emerges from the darkness will be different from the one that entered it. The plague, just as the world seems to be healing from one catastrophe, a new horror arrives on the trade winds. The plague. It comes, as plagues do, quietly at first. A few sailors in the port of Syracuse fall ill with fever and swollen lymph nodes. Within days, it spreads through the crowded districts near the harbour like fire through dry grass. The symptoms are horrific. Massive swellings in the neck, armpits and groin, fever that drives men mad with delirium, and death that comes quickly and mercilessly. You first hear about it from other farmers at the weekly market in Syracuse. Theo has sent you to trade olive oil for tools, a routine trip that connects the farm to the wider world. But instead of the usual talk about weather and crops, everyone is whispering about the sickness in the port. "My cousin's a fisherman," says Andreas, an elderly man who grows grapes on the hillside opposite Theo's farm. Says half the dock workers are dead already. Bodies piled up like cordwood, waiting to be burned. The description sends a chill through you that has nothing to do with the weather. You've heard stories of plagues before, ancient tales of divine punishment and mass death. But this is the first time you've encountered one personally. When you return to the farm and tell Theo what you've heard, his face grows grave. "We'll stay away from the port," he decides immediately. "No more market trips until this passes." But isolation, while prudent, cannot completely protect you. The plague spreads along every trade route, carried by merchants, refugees, and travellers who don't even know they're infected. Sicily, despite its relative isolation, cannot escape what has become a Mediterranean-wide catastrophe. Within weeks, the disease reaches Syracuse proper, then spreads to the surrounding countryside. Bodies begin to appear along the roads, travellers who fell ill and died far from home. Entire families disappear overnight, their house is standing empty and silent. Theo makes the hard decision to move your small household to an isolated hill farm, higher in the mountains and far from any major roads. "We'll wait it out there," he says grimly, his weathered face showing the strain of yet another crisis. "Like we waited out the darkness." The abandoned farm belongs to a distant relative who fled to the mainland when the plague first appeared. It's primitive even by the standards of rural Sicily. A stone house with thick walls, a small olive grove, a few terraced fields, and most importantly, a reliable spring that provides clean water. For months, you live in near complete isolation. Theo ventures to the lower villages only when absolutely necessary, always returning to scrub himself thoroughly with harsh lye soap and pray that he hasn't brought death home with you. Maria tends a small garden and preserves every scrap of food, knowing that self-sufficiency might mean the difference between life and death. The isolation is psychologically difficult, especially for you. At 12 years old now, you think, time has become fluid in this crisis-torn world. You crave human contact and stimulation. But the alternative is death, and you've seen enough death to understand the choice. News from the outside world comes rarely, carried by the occasional traveller brave or desperate enough to risk the journey. The reports are uniformly grim. The plague has spread across the entire Mediterranean world. Egypt, the granary of the empire, has lost half its population. Constantinople, already weakened by the previous year's crises, is dying by the thousands daily. The imperial government has essentially collapsed outside the capital's immediate vicinity. Some regions have been completely depopulated. Ships arrive in ports to find entire cities empty except for the dead. Trade has collapsed completely, throwing the interconnected Mediterranean economy into chaos that compounds the natural disasters. But gradually, after what feels like an eternity, the plague begins to burn itself out. Populations that survive develop some resistance. The most virulent strains kill their hosts too quickly to spread efficiently. By the time spring arrives, marked by the return of something approaching normal sunlight, the worst seems to have passed. When Theo finally ventures down to Syracuse again, he returns with news both good and terrible. The plague has passed, leaving the city half empty but functioning. Ships are beginning to arrive again, carrying both supplies and news from other parts of the Mediterranean world. The empire still exists, he reports, sitting by the fire that evening. Emperor Justinian survived the plague, though barely, but whole provinces have been lost. The death toll. He shakes his head. No one knows how many have died. Millions, certainly. Maria looks up from her weaving. "And your village?" she asks you gently. "Any news?" Theo's expression grows sad. "I asked about villages in that region. Most were abandoned during the darkness. Those few people who survived the famines. Many died in the plague." The words hit you like a physical blow, though you've been preparing for this news for months. Your old life, your village, your neighbours, the world you knew as a child, is gone, erased by the twin catastrophes of climate and disease. Letters from the past. It's been over a year since the fire in Constantinople when the letter finally arrives. You're working in Theo's olive grove, carefully pruning the trees that are finally showing signs of returning to full health, when Maria calls from the farmhouse. "A letter from the city!" Your hands shake as you break the wax seal. Letters are rare and precious things, especially ones that travel so far. The writing is in a careful script that you recognize with a shock of joy and disbelief. "My dearest child," it begins, "we have searched for you everywhere. The fire separated us and we feared you were dead. We are alive, working in Thessalonica now. If this letter finds you, please write back immediately. We never stopped looking for you. Your loving mother, Anna." You collapse to your knees in the olive grove, sobbing with relief and joy so intense it's almost painful. They're alive. Your parents are alive. The letter continues with their story, how they escaped the fire by fleeing to a different part of the city, how they searched the ruins and refugee camps for weeks, how they eventually gave up for dead and left Constantinople when the plague arrived, how they've been working as labourers in Thessalonica, always hoping for word of you. That evening, with Maria's help, you compose a reply. The letter-writing process takes hours, each word carefully chosen, each sentence read and reread to ensure it conveys your safety and your desperate desire to see them again. The letter exchange that follows takes months. Each message is a precious lifeline across the slowly healing Mediterranean world. You learn that your father found work as a supervisor on a large estate outside Thessalonica, managing labourers who are rebuilding farms devastated by the crises. Your mother works in the estate's household, spinning and weaving for the landowner's family. They're not wealthy, but they're surviving, even managing to save small amounts of money. More importantly, they've found a place in a community that's rebuilding after the disasters. In your letters, you tell them about Sicily, about Theo and Maria's kindness, about the work you're learning and the life you're building. You describe the gradual return of normal weather, the way the olive trees are recovering, the small signs that the world is slowly healing. But underneath all the practical details, every letter carries the same desperate question. When can you be reunited? The answer comes in your mother's fifth letter. We have saved enough money for passage. In the spring, when the sailing season opens fully, we will come to Sicily. We never stopped believing we would find you. The reunion. 2 years after the darkness first fell across your village, you stand on the dock at Syracuse, scanning the faces of passengers disembarking from a ship that's arrived from the north. Your heart pounds with anxiety and hope in equal measure. You're taller now, stronger from farm work and the trials you've endured. Your hands are calloused like a working man's, and your face has lost the soft roundness of childhood. But when your mother spots you in the crowd, there's no mistaking the recognition in her eyes. "My son," she cries, breaking into a run despite the dignity expected of a woman her age. The reunion is everything you dreamed of and more. They hold you like they'll never let go, whispering your name over and over, touching your face to make sure you're real. Your father, who you'd never seen cry before, weeps openly. Your mother has aged more than the 2 years that have passed. Her hair, once brown, is now streaked with grey. Lines of worry and grief mark her face, but her eyes are the same, full of the love that has sustained you through the darkest times. Your father looks thinner, his frame showing the effects of hard labour and inadequate food. But he stands straight and proud, his hands strong from work, his eyes bright with the joy of reunion. They tell you their story in fragments over the following days, how they searched the ruins of Constantinople for weeks, how they eventually fled the plague-ridden city, how they've thought of you every single day since the fire. The tale of their survival is as harrowing as your own, filled with hunger, disease, displacement, and the constant uncertainty of life in a world turned upside down. Your father has become a different man, more serious, more aware of how quickly everything can change. I never want to be caught unprepared again, he says as you show him around Theo's farm. Never want to be powerless when my family needs protection. Your mother, too, has changed. She's more self-reliant now, more confident in her ability to survive anything. The woman who once deferred to your father's decisions now speaks her mind freely, having learned that survival sometimes requires questioning authority. New beginnings. After much discussion, your family decides to stay in Sicily. Theo has offered to help your father establish his own farm on some unused land nearby. The soil is good, the climate is recovering, and most importantly, there's opportunity here for people willing to work hard. The old world is gone, your father says one evening as you sit around Theo's fire planning for the future. Our village, our neighbours, the life we knew, it's all finished. But maybe that's not entirely bad. Maybe we can build something better. The work of establishing a new farm is back-breaking. You help clear land, plant olive trees, build terraces for vegetables, and construct a small but sturdy house. Every stone placed, every tree planted, represents hope for a future that seemed impossible during the darkest days. Your mother sets up a household with the efficiency born of hard experience. She establishes connections with other farming families, trades surplus goods at the market, and slowly builds the network of relationships that sustain rural communities. You continue learning from Theo, but also from other farmers in the region. Sicily is becoming a place of renewal, attracting displaced people from across the Mediterranean who are looking for a fresh start. The mixture of experience and innovation creates a dynamic environment where new methods and old wisdom combine. The sun shines normally now, bright and warm and yellow the way it should be. Crops grow as they're supposed to. Children are born healthy. The immediate crisis has passed, though its scars remain everywhere you look. Your family's new farm prospers modestly. Nothing spectacular, but steady progress that provides security and hope. You have your own olive grove now, your own animals, your own piece of land that no catastrophe can take away from you. But you're different now. All of you are. The experiences of the past 2 years have changed you in fundamental ways. You've seen the fragility of civilization, felt the terror of abandonment, witnessed how quickly the world can change. These lessons have made you stronger, more resourceful, more appreciative of simple things like enough food and a safe place to sleep. Sometimes, in quiet moments, you remember the blue sun hanging in that hazy sky over your childhood village. You remember the cold, the hunger, the fear. But mostly you remember that people survived. Not all of them, not even most of them, but enough. Enough to rebuild, enough to continue, enough to ensure that the world keeps turning, even after it nearly stopped. Your parents have given you brothers and sisters now, small children who will grow up in this new world, who will hear the story of the blue sun as ancient history. For them, the current world of normal sunshine and adequate harvests will seem natural and permanent. But you know better. You've learned that nothing is permanent, that catastrophe can strike without warning, that survival depends on preparation, community, and the will to keep going when everything seems hopeless. The farm continues to grow and prosper. Your olive oil wins prizes at the regional markets. Your family's name becomes known for quality and reliability. Slowly, carefully, you're building the kind of life that can survive whatever future catastrophes might come. The end of darkness, the catastrophe of 536 CE was indeed real, though few people today remember it. Modern scientists believe it was caused by massive volcanic eruptions, possibly in Indonesia or Iceland, that threw enough ash into the atmosphere to block sunlight across much of the northern hemisphere for a year and a half. The climate disaster led directly to widespread crop failures across Europe, Asia, and parts of Africa. Entire regions experienced famine that lasted for years. Weakened populations fell victim to diseases, including what was likely the first major outbreak of the bubonic plague that would return centuries later as the Black Death. The death toll was staggering, perhaps 25 to 50 million people across the affected regions. Entire civilizations teetered on the edge of collapse. The Byzantine Empire never fully recovered its former power and extent. Trade networks that had sustained the ancient world for centuries were disrupted permanently, but humanity endured. People like the family in this story, farmers, craftsmen, dock workers, orphaned children, found ways to survive, to adapt, to rebuild. They developed new farming techniques suited to the changed climate. They created new trade relationships to replace the ones that had been broken. They passed down hard-won knowledge about survival and community resilience. In our modern world of global communication, international aid and scientific understanding, it's hard to imagine the total isolation and uncertainty that people faced in 536 CE. When the sun turned blue and crops failed around the world, there was no CNN to explain what was happening. No Red Cross to provide emergency aid, no scientific community to study the problem and predict when it might end. People had to rely on their own resources, their own communities, and their own determination to survive. The fact that civilization continued at all is a testament to human resilience and the power of hope. Perhaps that's the most important lesson from the worst year in human history. No matter how dark the world becomes, no matter how hopeless the situation seems, people find ways to keep going. They protect their families, help their neighbours, and hold on to hope even when hope requires an act of faith. The blue sun of 536 CE eventually faded back to normal yellow. The crops eventually grew again. The temperature eventually returned to seasonal patterns. Life, incredibly, went on. And in the end, that might be the most remarkable thing of all. The simple, stubborn human refusal to give up, even in the face of what seems like the end of the world. So tonight, as you drift off to sleep in your warm bed with a full stomach and electric lights keeping the darkness at bay, take a moment to appreciate the miraculous normalcy of your life. The sun that will rise tomorrow morning, bright and yellow and warm, is not guaranteed. The food on your table, the roof over your head, the complex civilization that sustains your daily life, all of it is more fragile than we like to believe. But take comfort too in knowing that humans have survived much worse than anything our modern world has faced. We've endured the blue sun and lived to tell the tale. We've rebuilt from the ashes of collapsed civilizations. We've found ways to keep the light burning even in the darkest times. The morning always comes, eventually, and when it does, we'll be there to greet it, as we always have been, as we always will be. Sleep well, and remember, even if the sun should turn blue tomorrow, the human spirit burns bright enough to light the way home.